Should you invest in a rental property today with interest rates more than double what they were just 2 years ago? Or should you sit it out and wait for interest rates to come down and properties to become more affordable? I think the answer to this is yes to both, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but I'm gonna explain how that can be the case. I'm Kirby Atwell. I help people buy the highest cash flowing short-term rentals possible. And in this video, I'm gonna explain how the interest rates impact different types of properties. Because I think the key to being able to pull the trigger and buy a great high cash flowing rental property today is understanding a few key drivers that create a really great deal in today's environment, not the market of 2 years ago. Hey, real quick, the sponsor for today's video is the #1 banking platform built specifically for rental property investors. I am constantly looking for the best tools to manage my properties and my finances, and in my opinion, Baselane has built the ultimate all-in-one solution. Baselane allows you to set up unlimited virtual bank accounts and debit cards for better visibility in your cash flow and finances, and you can also do other things like sign leases with tenants, collect rent, keep track of your books, and review your analytics, and finally, it's all in one place. Plus, they have the industry-leading annual percentage yield, which is just a fancy way of saying you make a lot more money on the money that you have deposited in your Baselane bank accounts. So I personally use the platform along with over 40,000 other real estate investors. So you can use the link that just popped up, and it's also in the video description below, and open as many business bank accounts as you want, and it's all for free. The link is baselane.com/Kirby, which is my first name. That's BASELANE.com/KIRBY. All right, so let's dive into how interest rates impact a couple of different scenarios. And I want to start with the traditional type of short-term rental. And this is the one that most people think of when they think of Airbnbs. It's the typically single-family type of house in a vacation-y area like the Smoky Mountains or Joshua Tree or beachfront locations. This one happens to be located in Destin, Florida, and I want to show you how interest rates impact this type of property. So here's what the numbers look like for Destin, Florida. So I just pulled up the median sold price is $659,666, and then on the right hand side you can see the AirDNA numbers. So the average occupancy rate right now is 61% across the previous year, and the average daily rate is $374. So from that we can calculate some average income, and then we can look at some average expenses. So for this type of property, this traditional Destin, Florida beach vacation rental, you know, the averages that we just showed, $374 average daily rate, 61% occupancy, you multiply that by 365 days in a year, and you're gonna get an average income of $84,636, or right around $7,000 a month of gross income. So that sounds like a lot, but then you look at the average purchase price of $660, and what you need to put down on a down payment if you're putting 20% down on a property, and you can see what the payments are. So 2 years ago, if you got an investment loan at 4%, which was very doable with 20% down, your payment would have been $25.21. But in today's environment, which is closer to 8%, you're gonna pay $38.74. So you can see there's about a $1,350 difference between the two payments. So let's see how that impacts the bottom line on a property like this. So I just put together some average costs, some average expenses on a property like this of what you would expect. So if we have a gross income of $7,000, you got to subtract out the mortgage today at 8%. You've got cleaning fees of around $1,000 most likely, taxes around $500, insurance around $300, utilities, Wi-Fi, lawn care, pool, consumables, maintenance. So you're left with, at the end of the day, right around just under $1,000 a month of net cash flow. That's what you're actually sticking in your pocket at the end of the day. A lot of people focus on that top line. They focus on that $7,000 of income, and it sounds like a good deal, but you really have to look at how do all the expenses, including your mortgage at today's rates, impact the bottom line. So let's just keep that in mind and then compare that to a different type of short-term rental that most people don't consider. And that's this one. Now, this is a pretty ugly property. This is our most recent deal, and it's not what it looks like today, but this is what it looked like when we purchased it. We purchased it right at the beginning of the year, and we bought it for $94,000, and we put in just over $100,000 into rehabbing it. So all in for just over $200,000 total. And the huge value add for this property is that in the lower right-hand corner, you can see what the single family house looks like. That's the main house on the property. But then in the upper left-hand corner, you can see what the ADU structure or carriage house or casita or whatever you want to call it, it looks like in the back of the property. And it came with both these structures. They both had, all the utilities to them. Even though they needed rehabbing, you basically are getting two houses for $94,000, which is a great deal. This happens to be in Michigan City, Indiana, which is where we invest primarily in short-term rentals. This is what those properties look like today. So we spent about 3 months rehabbing the properties. We rehabbed the front one and the back one. And it was mostly cosmetic. There was some plumbing. We added a bathroom to the main house. So instead of a 3-1, it's a 3-2. But these are the listing pictures. So we bought it in February, right at the beginning of February, and we listed it right at the beginning of May on Airbnb after we finished the rehab. And so I want to go through what these numbers look like and how interest rates impact the numbers today on a property like this compared to the Destin Beach one that we just looked at. So again, $94,900 was a purchase price, so it wasn't $94,000, it was $94,900. Rehab of about $120,000, and after repair value, we just had it appraised about 2 weeks ago for $347,000. The income on this property, the average nightly rate is $195 for the main house and $125. And these are projected numbers based off comps in the area. We own quite a few other properties in the area, and these are really conservative. I think we're actually going to exceed these numbers, but we always use the most conservative numbers when calculating. And so we use an average occupancy of 61%. It'll be a lot higher in the summer, lower in the winter. And so we're averaging, ironically, right around that $7,000, just over $7,000 a month, just like the Destin Beach property. Now, the main thing to take into consideration, though, is the expenses, because this is a much lower cost property. Even though it's bringing in the same amount as that beautiful Destin Beach, Florida property, we're gonna look at what the expenses are. So the mortgage on this property is $1,698, or it will be as soon as we're finished with the refinance here. The taxes are much lower than the Destin Beach property. It's $167, insurance $108, cleaning similar, around $1,000, utilities similar, lawn and snow, there's no pool, consumables, maintenance. So our total costs, or our total expenses for the month are $4,248. So this leads to a cash flow of $2,844. So if you think about, and this is at 7.5% interest rate, we're using Easy Street Capital, which is a DSCR lender, so you can look them up. Great lender to use, but we were able to keep it at a 70% LTV because we created so much value with the rehab, and that brought our interest rate down from about 8% to 7.5%. So we're getting 70% of the appraised value out of this property, which basically refinances all of our money out of it. We have no money invested, which causes a infinite cash on cash return, and it causes the interest rate to be lower than it would have been at a 75 or 80% LTV. So the main thing I want to show you, though, is how interest rates impact this deal, because a lot of people will say, well, I want to sit out and wait until interest rates come back down to buy a property. And so if you look at a property like this, I think that mindset makes a lot of sense with the Destin Beach property, because the difference was about $1,300 or something like that in cash flow. I mean, that's all goes straight to your bottom line. So that makes a huge impact in whether that's a good deal or not. But for a property like this, the difference between a 4% and 8% mortgage is, $1,698 for the 8% or 7.5% mortgage, compared to if we got it down to rates of 2 years ago at 4%, we'd maybe save $300 a month. Maybe it's $1,300 or something like that, or maybe even $400 a month. So the logic then would be, well, I'm going to sit out and not do a deal like this that pays me $2,844 every single month, because it's not $3,200 a month. If interest rates were 4%, then we'd make an extra $300-400 on top of that. So you're going to walk away from almost $3,000 a month of income coming in on a deal because it's not $300 higher than that. So it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense on a property like this. Again, not necessarily on a property like the Destin Beach, Florida property. So the three things that I think are really important to keep in mind if you're considering whether you should buy a property today or whether it still makes sense. And that is, do the deal fundamentals make sense? And what I mean by that is, at today's rates, does the property cash flow as a short-term rental and a long-term rental? This is a tough test. You definitely have to buy some affordable properties to make this work, to make the cash flow work as a short-term rental and long-term rental at today's rates. But a lot of people will justify buying something with negative cash flow in today's environment because they're like, well, someday the interest rates will come down. I don't like to play the someday game and speculate about that. I like to know I'm getting cash flow today while the property appreciates over time. The second question, is the area improving, and will you be excited to own in this location 20 years from now? So there's pockets, I think, where you can find properties that cash flow really well. And they might do okay from a cash flow standpoint today, but that area is pretty rough and it's not getting any better. And so I would only purchase in areas that meet the first criteria, but then also meet the criteria of you being excited about the prospect of owning this property 20 years from now in this location. Are things improving? Are they making more, are they improving the infrastructure? Are more people moving into the area? Are there better jobs? Are things getting better overall to where that's going to drive up the value of the property over the long run? And then the last question to ask is, have you run your numbers conservatively? I see people all the time today really stretching their numbers, really trying to, increase that nightly rate and occupancy to try to justify buying a property today, knowing that they probably shouldn't be buying that property. And they're trying to just prove it to themselves that it might work. Run your numbers in the most conservative manner possible because you never know what's going to happen next year. Interest rates might, continue to go up, and your nightly rate might come down, your occupancy might come down. So you want to be prepared and know that this property is going to do well even in the worst case scenario. There's always going to be a reason not to buy a property or not to get started with real estate investing. It always feels more risky to buy a property than to sit on the sideline and wait. But sometimes the most risky thing you can do is nothing at all. If you found a deal that hits these 3 requirements and you can check these off, then you found a deal that's going to maximize cash flow in today's environment and at the same time protect your downside. I work with people personally to help them find, buy, and set up super high cash flowing short-term rentals just like the one I just showed you. And so if you're interested in working with me, you can set up a call with me directly at the link that just popped up. There's a short questionnaire and then you get access right to my calendar so you can book a time for us to talk through your goals and the details of the program and see if it's a good fit for you. Thanks for joining me for this video. God bless, and I'll see you in the next video.